Good morning, my name's James White, I'm the Managing Director of Media First, and I'm joined on the sofa today by Victoria Smith, who is one of our trainers here at Media First. Vic, why don't you just tell us a little bit about your background?
Yeah, happy to.
Where are you from? Who are you?
I know, who is she? So obviously I work for Media First, but my background is as a journalist. 30 odd years in the business, started in print journalism, got my qualifications that way, moved into radio, worked across BBC, the independent sector, LBC. I was a newsreader on Classic FM, worked with the likes of Jeremy Vine and Vanessa Feltz, then moved into TV latterly, ITV London, Good Morning Britain, Reuters, Associated Press, and latterly Euronews as one of their UK correspondents. Taught myself to film, edit, write, report, basically do everything in one package, because as a freelancer, the more skills you have, the more work you get. So that's me in a nutshell, James. But now we're here today to talk to you and hopefully help you through some of the areas, some of the potentials, the pitfalls, and definitely the possibilities ahead for you and your spokespeople when it comes to broadcast media.
Yes. So this is one of our monthly masterclasses that we run as part of the Media Team Academy. So I know this time we've actually opened it up to a wider audience. So there's going to be people in the room, virtual room, so to speak, who are members of the Media Team Academy, who are working in comms and media and have signed up to that subscription package. And there are going to be other people there who potentially don't know so much about Media First or the Media Team Academy itself. In fact, guys, we do want to make this interactive, so jump into the chat on Zoom and you can just let us know whether or not you have maybe even attended media training, maybe with Media First or with someone else, you know, and what has motivated you to come along to today's masterclass. That'd be really helpful to know. In fact, we are going to move on to Menti as well. So for those of you that haven't used it, you should have some instructions appearing all over the place on the screen now. And if you go on your phone or your web browser or on a iPad, if you've got that next to your tablet, and if you go to menti.com and enter the code that's on the screen there, which is 71550400. The other option you've got, as you can see, is you can just scan that QR code on your phone. What that's going to do is it's going to get you in to be able to see. I can already see some people going in there and clicking the thumbs up. Thank you very much. That's just going to allow you to interact with us in a few different ways. So there's a chat button in the bottom right where you can ask questions, and we can then display those questions to you. You can go in there and you can upvote those questions, I believe, as well. So if you've not got a particular question, you could go in there and have a look. And also it's just going to mean that you're going to be able to join in when we do some interactive votes, because we want to hear from you guys. In fact, the opening 2 or 3 slides, we're going to be asking questions of you. We want to understand more about your experience. So I can see that we've got some people coming into Menti now. Thanks for giving us the thumbs up on that. So let's jump into it, I think, and get the conversation started. And then we've got lots to share with you. We've got some video clips, some audio clips. We're going to go through making the most of PR or broadcast media opportunities from both a comms perspective, but also from a spokesperson's perspective. So whichever side of that fence you're on, stick with us and hopefully you'll get some benefit out of what we're talking about today. So let's have a look. So why would you want to get more broadcast opportunities? Now, I'm asking that question at the start, or we're asking that question at the start, because we're really interested to hear what your thoughts are on this. So you should be able to type those thoughts in now. I think we might need to press enter to be able to show those answers, guys. But if you go on there and type them in, then they're going to pop up on the screen and we'll be able to get a sense of what you're looking at.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes, please take part, because we want to know from you where you stand when it comes to broadcast opportunities and why you are proactive, or maybe why you're not, and what might be holding you back, and which is presumably why you're here today, to talk about with us what you can get from the world of broadcast, which, as a journalist, I have to say, we would love it if more companies were more proactive and came to us with their stories, their campaigns, their calls to action. So it'd be really good to see what you have to say on that subject. So we're getting a few answers coming in.
Yeah, we are. So we've popped those up on screen now, but we can see the first one that came in was about fundraising. So, that's going to be the same whether or not you're a charity or you're, a profitable organisation. Ultimately, you're probably doing some form of media because you want to raise money. Raising awareness for your organisation so more people can join us and our campaigns to publicise our work. Like, these are really common kind of requirements, aren't they, as to why people decide to do broadcast. And we're going to look at that as well. Is broadcast the right fit for you? Because it might be the case that, print is better. But also defining what broadcast actually is, because that's changed a lot over the years. And certainly through even in the last 2 or 3 years, the COVID years or out the back of the COVID years, that's changed quite a lot, hasn't it, Vic? With a lot more being done on Zoom and things like that.
Yeah, we really need to talk about Zoom, because that is a real opportunity for people, for you and your spokespeople to get to us more directly, more quickly, and lots of different opportunities via Zoom with print now, radio and TV as well. So really something to think about, because I think it's here to stay. Certainly
it's here to stay.
For the time being,
Yeah, 100%. So that's really helpful to get those answers in there. Thank you for all of you for contributing to that. Just having a quick look down there, seeing if there's anything else there. As an avenue to sway public opinion, my organisation gets good press coverage, but I don't seem to be able to get my expert spokespeople onto broadcast.
Yeah, that's another challenge,
raise their profile.
Isn't it? Sometimes spokespeople I know are sort of resistant in a way. They think that TV and radio is super scary, and obviously preparation really, really helps, and practice and all those things, and obviously we run the courses to help with that, but it's a great opportunity to get yourself heard and seen, and I know that comms people like you sometimes struggle, but if you can provide the preparation and practice, it's great to encourage people to do it.
Yeah, definitely. So again, we'll talk more about that as we go through, and hopefully we'll be able to answer off a lot of those kind of concerns and thoughts, and give you some ideas, give you some inspiration as to ways that you might be able to approach things differently, and maybe get a bit more broadcast coverage. So let's have a look at that. Another question for you though, guys, before we do, I've got 2 more questions. It won't take up much more of your time on this, but is broadcast coverage an important part of your organisation's PR campaigns?
Be honest.
Be honest completely. It's interesting, the majority of you are saying yes, but there are some no's coming in there. It's good to see, because there are so many different types of broadcast interviews, aren't there? And it's very easy to think classically that broadcast interviews are all about TV and radio, but actually something like this, for example, is just another form of broadcast. And there are lots of presentations these days which can actually be recorded and streamed, live streamed, and things like that. So panels,
blogs, webinars, all the kind of things that you might do in-house.
Yeah, completely. Online, it could be created by yourselves even, as in company-led content that you're creating, and wanting to get that out there, so you can be in control of that broadcast experience, a bit like we are here. So we've got 23 people saying yes, it is important, and 13 people saying no. So it's great just to get that balance and to see kind of who we've got in the room. My final question for you though is a bit more of a challenging one, because I'm now going to ask you to prioritize these opportunities based on your current PR strategy. What is most important to you? So it might take you a little bit longer to do, but again, just go onto Menti and organise that in a list. Now, I appreciate it'll be different for different campaigns, but just give us a sense, what's really important to you, and what kind of falls down the bottom, perhaps, as less important. Vic, what are you seeing on our courses when you're delivering
training
that people are saying is most important, do you think?
Yeah, I mean, it changes, but people are seeing the advantage of, we were talking about this earlier, you know, people think classically in terms of TV, radio, obviously podcastings, we're seeing a real growth market in that, but any kind of social media that can help publicise your organisation, your message or your call to action, because news has changed, hasn't it? It's not just those traditional outlets. We all have our own news feeds, so we make our own news and we read our own news, and we all have different ideas about what the news is, what's in it for me, what relates to us. So yeah, you could be talking about B2B and industry-wide news, you could be talking about a generalist audience, so you get to decide, you know, what you're, in a way, which news outlet and how that's going to be perceived and operated. Interesting to see these answers coming in now, and they're changing all the time.
So newspapers and TVs national are kind of at the top, but they're switching around. It's a tight fight for local and regional. Often, you know, local and regional does get neglected. People don't, you know, push for that as hard as perhaps they should do. And I think the same can be said of trade. I think what's really interesting, though, is that they all feed into each other, in the sense that the national news will get their news sometimes from, or news ideas from, the regional, and the regional gets it from the local, and the local gets it from trade sometimes, you know, and they all kind of feed off each other. So it's really important to be across all of them as many ways as you can.
Yeah, interesting that newspapers is hanging on in there at the top for everybody, followed by TV. In fact, TV and radio pretty tied.
They are tied, aren't they?
And
yeah,
national
definitely.
more than regional.
And then down the bottom we've got magazines, podcasting and trade media, or trade media broadcast. And I think that's interesting. Yeah, maybe shouldn't be a focus, but it is a great kind of learning ground, isn't it? You know, for spokespeople to be able to really get confident with broadcast. If you do have people, you know, whether it's, you know, within your industry, who are doing things like this, you know, to be able to get onto the sofa and to do things like this is going to be really helpful when it comes to doing the national TV and stuff.
And also, although trade media, podcasting, magazines are at the bottom, these could be a way in for your spokespeople. That's more, I mean, I would say, I would encourage you and your people to take any broadcast opportunity, because it's always going to have some kind of impact. Plus, it's going to give you and your spokespeople that extra layer of practice for when perhaps a bigger opportunity comes along. And as you rightly say, on a local level, experts, real sort of, they know their niches, they know their subjects, they know their areas. Never underestimate the power of the local broadcast media.
No, and I think we get an example of that a bit later on, won't we?
We think we will, yes.
Good. So thank you very much, guys. I really appreciate that. That's really interesting information there to be able to see, and I hope it helps you just to see kind of how your peers and in other industries and other companies are looking at it. Let's have a quick look at the benefits of broadcast opportunities, because we've spoke about some of these already. So, you know, and I know that many of you will already have a good idea in your own head as to what you think the benefits are. But let's just have a quick whiz through from our perspective, you know, what we think. This free publicity thing is really interesting, because I'm not keen on the word free, and I know that you guys put a huge amount of work into being able to get media opportunities and to secure those media slots, and there's a whole team behind it and a lot of money gets spent on it. So it's not really free, but what we're calling it, you know, we say free publicity as opposed to paid, as opposed to advertising. So it's not directly transactional from that perspective. But of course, you know, that is why we're all in media and PR, is to be able to get that publicity, to promote awareness, and to encourage more people to, you know, come to us, you know, when they need help or when they want to talk about something. So that free publicity, that's what we mean by that.
From a journalist point of view, of course, we're very keen to be seen not to give free publicity, but if it's a strong story, a great call to action, and you've got a great spokesperson, inevitably your name will get mentioned as part of the interview. And of course, when you prepare with your spokesperson, you'll know the importance of emphasising the name of your own brand or your own company as many times as they can in the interview. And there's not much that we can do about that as the journalist or interviewer.
Without it sounding weird.
If you want to mention the company's name. Exactly so.
Yeah. That brand building, it's part of the same thing, isn't it? The other thing I'd say just with both of these is that, and we're going to summarise at the end with some key takeaways, but one of the things when it comes to this brand building and free publicity, and yes, you've already said about name checking your organisation, but if you've got some really strong visuals, if you can give a behind the scenes look at your factory or, whatever it is that you're doing, then that's going to help you as well, and there's an opportunity there for some brand awareness that you might be able to get.
Even wear a sweatshirt with the company's logo won't hurt either. That's something that we see a lot.
Yeah, definitely. The big thing though, really, I think for all media is just about being able to shape the debate, isn't it? And as a journalist, Vic, what is it that you're looking for from your spokespeople?
Yeah, so it's interesting. If we're doing a straightforward interview, straightforward news piece, obviously we want opinion, we want a strong message, a strong call to action, although you have to be careful sometimes that you don't get diverted into talking about politics or your views on the government, so that's a bit of a balance there. But if it's, say, a podcast or a profile piece, then now's your opportunity for your spokesperson to really perhaps think about thought leadership and building a brand and using opinion and storytelling as a real way to get impact and to get your audience to recognise and understand your brand and your message. So absolutely.
But ultimately, as a journalist, you want someone who's going to come on and move that debate forward, don't you? You want something that's going to be new. You need to push the story forward continually. Yeah. So if you've got spokespeople who are capable of doing that, you've got organisations who have prepared some really strong messages, and they know the time. It's about timing, isn't it, as to when to come in and be able to push that forward. But yeah, definitely shaping that debate, is a massive benefit for any organisation. Talking about influencing, we spoke about it a little bit. We'll talk more about it in a moment, but the importance of targeting multiple mediums. Ultimately, we know that people have to hear the same message time and time again before it sinks in. And certainly with broadcast, often in the more classical broadcast of radio or TV, as opposed to something like this where you've been invited to come along and you've chosen to give up your time. And thank you for that. But certainly with radio, you're driving along in the car and you've got it in the background whilst you're on the school run and things like that. That you've got to target these multiple mediums, haven't you? Because a lot of times it's just drip, 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 drip to be able to get that message across. And one of the big benefits of broadcast is that it's more classically the mass media. But not always, as we see with podcasts and trade media and things like that.
Yeah, one way to do this, of course, is to get your spokesperson to do a Zoom interview, which then can be used in a variety of ways. It can be used on print, radio, TV. So that is an opportunity as well. So it's really worth getting that Zoom shot right and really thinking about how you do a Zoom interview and what it looks like. We'll talk a bit about that in a while.
Yeah, but before we move on to that though, just to be clear, broadcast media are much more accepting of Zoom interviews these days, aren't they? Obviously, they had to be throughout COVID, and it was a way to keep people on air. But we're seeing now that they're continually still very happy with that, aren't they?
That's here to stay, I think it's safe to say, at least for the time being.
From a broadcaster's perspective, why is that here to stay? Why is that?
It's simpler, it's easier. We're more likely to get guests who don't have to perhaps trek into the studio at 4 o'clock in the morning if they can do a good Zoom interview. And things are changing now. Often premises will have their own studio that can be used. People are getting better at doing it from home. There's still a long way to go. You still see a lot of mistakes being made. But we're trying to help with that in the profession that we're in because it is certainly here to stay for now.
Yeah, you do. You see some people with some amazing messaging and really good spokespeople, but then just horrible backgrounds and, cameras looking up their nose and things like that. And it's just really distracting. So that's definitely something that we all need to work on and make sure that our spokespeople are doing the best, putting themselves forward the best they can be, are well lit and things like that. Builds credibility and profile. We'll talk a bit. I've got another kind of comment on that in a moment. Encourages discussion. More control, especially live interviews. This is an interesting one. So why do you have more control in live interviews, Vic?
Well, shall we ask people to maybe have a think about this? If I were to ask one of you or all of you, if you prefer to do a live or a pre-recorded interview, there's no wrong or right answer. I often do this in the classes that we have here, and you usually get a split down the middle of people that want to do live and people that want to do pre-recorded. People who say pre-rec is because, they think, well, it gives me a chance if I make a mistake to do it again. I might feel more relaxed and less worried. And these are all true facts. But the advantage of going live is that nobody can edit what you say when you're live, so you have the floor for two to 3 minutes. Having said that, the same rule applies to both live and pre-rec, that you want to get the important stuff right up at the top. And that's because if you do a pre-rec interview, it will be edited. And that usually means the first 20 seconds is taken out of your lovely long interview, and that 20 seconds is the bit that people will hear throughout the rest of the day on news bulletins or as part of a longer feature or a longer package. So that 20 seconds at the top is absolutely crucial in terms of your messaging. So advantages to both live and pre-rec, but a pre-rec interview will be edited and you don't have control of that. So you might encourage your spokesperson to go live for that reason.
Yeah, and a live interview could be clipped, couldn't it? As you've already said, there might be played all the way through. But the importance of working on a soundbite that can just be really succinctly cut and delivered really well. Even in live interviews, soundbites are important, aren't they?
Absolutely.
Because you've got to be aware of that editing process. And we call that, when you're talking about getting information right at the start, we call that front loading. In our training, and the importance of getting that. Often you're doing an interview and the really juicy bit comes right at the end and you're like, and from a journalist perspective, when they're doing a pre-rec, if you can give them that to right at the start, if you're doing a Zoom or a phone or a down the line interview, as I'm looking down the lens of the camera now, if you can do that really quickly and get that soundbite out really quickly, then the journalist will be like, that's brilliant, thank you. Right, and you might have the shortest interview in the world, but you might also have, the best interview because you've got the message, you were in control, and you've presented it on a plate to the journalist or to the broadcaster. So that's why it's really important to work on that stuff. And shorter, Vic made me put this in here. She made me say that TV is fun.
It is fun. It's great fun.
It is fun. It is fun. Once you've kind of got over the anxiety of it and, you've practiced it and you feel comfortable in your environment. And that's one of the powers, isn't it, of media training for spokespeople, is getting comfortable within an environment, a studio environment, happy with the lights and happy with the weird things in your ears and all of that type of thing.
Definitely. And it is over quickly in most cases, within 2 minutes. Although bizarrely, people think, thank goodness it's over quickly, and then they're given the opportunity to do maybe a longer podcast when they've got more time and more conversation going on, and people really enjoy that as well. So there's challenges and good bits about whether you do a short interview or a longer podcast. And I'd encourage you to think about all of it.
Yeah, definitely. And I know spokespeople who will point blank refuse to do any radio or TV, but I know that they've also done podcasts.
Yeah.
And it does have a very different feel. We've got a podcasting studio next door and it is much more relaxed, and you can kind of sit there with a cup of tea, or if you're lucky, a glass of wine if you're doing it in the evening and it's appropriate. But you can have, it's a different vibe entirely, isn't it, doing a podcast?
It is, and it's a great opportunity for those longer sort of thought leadership or profile pieces as well.
Yeah, really good fun. So yeah, definitely get involved in that. And avoiding the dreaded empty chair. There there are times when a journalist will receive a press release or, be tipped off about an event and think, oh, that's really good, that's a really good story. And then they will go out and they talk to the comms and the media team and say, can I get a spokesperson? And just don't have one. There's none available. They're all at an off-site board meeting or whatever it is, and there's no one available or willing perhaps to put the time in. So when you do get those opportunities, when you do harvest them, and I know I'm talking to the converted here, but it's just really important to make sure that you put someone up if you get that opportunity.
Yeah, because it has happened, hasn't it, when broadcasters have taken advantage of a situation where perhaps a politician doesn't turn up and literally you do see the empty chair to make a point. Lump of lard.
Or a lettuce or something, yeah. And the final point that we've got about benefits of broadcast is in controlling a crisis. Schools are very good at this, certainly capitalising on regional radio. If there's a snow day, they will get out there and get ahead of it and say, our schools are closed. So there's lots of other ways that it can be useful when controlling a crisis, making people aware of what's happening in a local community and just getting that story out there quickly. And that's just a very small part of it. There's obviously a huge amount of crisis management that we talk about. But yeah, definitely broadcast should not be ignored in those things. So just very quickly, benefits of broadcast opportunities for the individuals. We whizzed through these, but I think it's important to have these up here because it's good for if you're trying to persuade a spokesperson to come on board. Why would they want to do it? Obviously, being a thought leader within an industry can be really helpful, and it can not just be good for your organisation, but it can also be good for them as an individual and potentially their own career progression. I had one of our clients was very good at getting people into media training. And she was getting lots of senior managers coming through for media training compared to her other PR managers. And it was a big organisation, 20, 25 PR managers. And this particular person was really good at persuading people to come on media training. And I said to her once, I said, why is it that you're booking more than any of your peers? And her response was, I'm really good at helping people get promoted.
That's a good response.
And I said, why do you think that is? Because we're raising their profile with everything that we're doing. When I'm working with them as a PR manager and I'm raising their profile, and I have a lot of success in getting them to director level. So that is probably a really big thing for you to bear in mind when you're talking to people. That raised profile that I was just talking about there. That becoming a go-to expert that ties into the thought leadership thing, but obviously important for the individuals as well as for the organisation itself. Improved knowledge. I think you can just get so much. These are such transferable skills, aren't they, doing these broadcast sessions, so it can be really helpful from that perspective. And also working closely with the comms team, you will learn more about the organisation, you will learn more about the audience that you're talking to, your ultimate customer. And so if they get that opportunity to work closely with the comms and media team, obviously that's going to be helpful. So for sure we want to see that. And the career development piece, which I've mentioned. Let's have a quick look at some stats here. So broadcast opportunities are open to you. I'll just give this a moment just to kind of sink in, because there's a lot of detail here. But what I think is really interesting is that the average age of the internet users, the social media users, is much lower. That's the kind of yellow. That's the 16 to 24-year-olds. And the 35 to 34 are the yellow and the orange. And obviously, well, not obviously, but as you would expect, more of those guys are getting their news from internet and social media. That said, radio, newspapers and television, certainly newspapers when you include their online reach as well, is staying pretty steady. They're pretty strong, you know. Newspapers and radio are pretty mirrored, you know, they're very similar stats. And television is much larger, but certainly with the older age group.
Yeah, and that Menti we did earlier on, James, do you remember everybody put, I think the top in order of priority was newspapers, but if you look at this graph, you can see how much newspapers are losing compared to the likes of social media and television, and that's probably important to bear in mind.
It really is, yeah. And you've got to be careful that it's the comms team who are driving that strategy as opposed to the senior leaders who are saying, I want to be in the FT, for example. But there are reasons why you would want to go for newspapers. There's obviously arguments for each of these. What this doesn't show us, though, when it comes to the internet and the social, is how much of that news is actually broadcast. It doesn't show us whether it's podcasts, whether it's videos, whether it's, videos that are produced and watched on YouTube, and a lot of people get their news via that now. They have trusted sources that they go to, and they will pick up their news from that.
Yeah, which may not be the traditional sources.
It might not be the traditional sources. No, exactly. So it's important to be able to think about that and target those audiences. But I'm sure you will do your own research into that and be able to figure out exactly, where you want to be targeting and why. So let's have a look at what comms teams and spokespeople should do when preparing for a broadcast opportunity. Vic,
some of you may well know this already. You may have seen this before, but I will just go through just so that you understand some of the tick boxes that you could tick to really help your spokespeople prepare so that they're confident then to go ahead and do broadcast interviews. So we use this acronym TRUTH, and there are 5 elements of this. And the first T is for topical or timely or trending, all those things that are out there that are about your brand, your industry, and that also applies to the questions that journalists might ask, topical questions that your spokesperson would be expected to know about. So there's a little bit of what we call horizon scanning, being aware of what people are talking about, what they're reading about, what might be on their social media feeds, so that you can tick that box and make your story and your message a topical one. And then the R that follows that is relevant, and that's in terms of the language that you use, relevant to your audience. Who is your audience? What does that look like, so that you can use the right language and the right examples, the relevant examples. If it's a local TV station, local radio, you'll want to use examples that are relevant to a local audience. So that's all part of the prep that you can help your spokesperson with. The U is a bit of fun. The U is unique or unusual. So these are the facts and figures and stats and stories that your organisation has that no one else has. You might be the first at something, the fastest, the longest, the widest, all these things that make you special and unique. And we'll settle for unusual if you've got a great little human interest story, rags to riches, a satisfied customer, your own story, your own story of a colleague who's done something interesting. We love that because we all love stories about people, and more importantly, the journalists love it, but more importantly, the audience really responds to unusual and unique. And these can be stats, facts, figures, percentages, surveys, all the fun stuff that really makes your story, your message stand out. And the other T is, this is the trouble element that journalists sniff out. We do like a little bit of trouble. We will come to you if there's a bit of trouble connected to your industry. We might ask those tricky, troublesome questions. In fact, we definitely will. But it can be an opportunity for you to use trouble as a platform so that you can accept that there is a bit of trouble around this subject, around this industry, even around your company or brand, and then you have an opportunity to tell us what you're going to do about it. So it can be a great little platform for you. So I would say don't worry too much about those tricky, troublesome questions. You can anticipate some, you can prepare for some, and even the ones that you might come at you out of the blue, we teach a technique to help with that as well, called bridging. But use the troublesome questions as a chance to explain your message and what you're going to do about that particular bit of trouble. And then finally, the H is super important, human interest, and those are those stories that we mentioned earlier, the human stories, the case studies. Every time you come to us with a story, a journalist will always ask, oh, do you have a case study to go with that? And if you've got one, fantastic. Your story, your message, your agenda will get on air if you've got a case study to go with it. Alternatives to case studies are your own stories, your spokesperson's own interesting backgrounds and stories. there's always something, there's always some little anecdote, something that's happened along the way that is worth broadcasting. And you can use the words you and yours when you're broadcasting as well to reach through to the audience rather than our clients, the customer, that kind of thing. You and yours and ours and we. So it's a more personal conversation that your spokesperson has with the audience. So that's truth in a nutshell.
That is truth in a nutshell. Yeah, the trouble thing's interesting, isn't it? Because it can be solving a problem. It doesn't always have to be, you don't have to be presented with a problem. So if you've got something that does solve a problem, then fantastic. And I love your ideas around you and yours. I think that sometimes I've heard in the past with radio in particular, I've heard when spokespeople have said, to all the people that are out there doing the school run now, this is going to be really important to you. Or, if you're stood there now doing the washing up, just think about how much water you're using, or whatever it might be. When it's a charity talking about water in a different country, or water problems, shortages in a different country, and then they're addressing that by talking about how often we're using a dishwasher at home, and things like that. I think,
it's the what's in it for me factor, which we all have. We all look at an article or listen to something or watch something because we think, oh, what's in it for me? Oh, this is about the budget. What's in it for me and my family? So if you can think of that as part of your prep with your spokesperson, what's in it for the audience that that he or she is going to be speaking to, then you really tick a big old box there. I think we should do that.
I worked with a journalist once who was very good at saying, who cares? And if you went to them with a kind of an idea, and this was when we were coming up with ideas for things that we might do to be able to help our customers, or talking about with the business, and her initial reaction was quite often, who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Who cares? Yeah, and it was until we got to that's when you knew, okay, right, I've cracked it. As long as I don't get who cares, then I'm all right.
Now, look, we've got a video we're going to show you. Now, this is somebody who is not a broadcaster. He hasn't had the benefit of a public school education. You'll all have heard of him. His name is Marcus Rashford. He's a footballer. But he is talking about, in this interview, he's got a really strong call to action, a really strong message that you're going to hear. And he's speaking in a really authentic and genuine way. He's speaking as a person who knows what it's like to have grown up in a really run-down part of Manchester. I know, because I've been there. Let's listen to Marcus, bearing in mind he doesn't have all the advantages of politicians with their public speaking education, and let's listen to see what story we can pick out from what he's saying.
We mentioned this at the beginning of COVID-19 and the problems that we were facing then compared to the problems that we're going to face after, which we're sort of getting to now. The problems after, it's going to be massive consequences of the virus. So,
when you're thinking about your own childhood, growing up in Wythenshawe, actually things could have been really different for you, couldn't they? Yeah, definitely.
45% of people like me, black people in different ethnic minorities, they're living in poverty, and I was very close to being one of that 45%. So I understand that it could have went either way for me, and I'm grateful that it went this way for me. But it doesn't make me forget about what happened in the past, and I obviously want to help them people and as much as I can, and just raise awareness really, because I think some people want to help. I definitely think that people want to help, but they don't have the understanding or the knowledge behind it, and they don't know how many people it's actually affecting.
So that's Marcus Rashford talking about the time when the government ended free school meals for the summer. As you might remember, he managed to turn that campaign around, get it reversed. Because of his story, the fact that he was there, he knows what it was like not to have enough food on the table. That interview is longer than the clip we just saw. He does ums and ers. He's not got a classic received pronunciation accent, but nobody cares because his story is compelling and his experience and his really strong call to action succeeded, and it got the government to listen to one guy. Obviously it helped that he's a world famous footballer, but his background is a working class lad from Wythenshawe. So although the fact he's not an expert in public speaking, his story and his call to action is really strong. So hopefully you saw that there.
And we're going to talk more about preparation, aren't we? And also more about audience, because that understanding of your audience is so important. And what he did so well there was just being so empathetic.
Empathetic and genuine, being authentic, being Marcus Rashford and not trying to be someone that he's not.
Yeah, completely.
And people worry, don't they? Said, I don't like my accent, and nobody minds, nobody cares, because we're human and it's all about being your real selves. So that can all be, that worry can be taken away, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, completely.
But yeah, we should look at the how else you can work on messaging, shouldn't we?
Yeah, definitely. Let's do that. Because this preparation piece is really interesting. We spoke then just about the audience. I mean, Vic, take us through this, because we've got another acronym here that might be handy.
Another acronym for you. This one is Amen, and that first A is for audience, because they are crucial. As I said earlier, it's not the journalist that really matters. You could kind of move us out the way and imagine who's behind us, and that is the audience. So knowing who your audience is and briefing your spokesperson on that will really help them understand who they're speaking to in terms of age, gender, what they do for a living, where they might live, what time of day the broadcast is going out. All these things will help you and your spokesperson to understand who your audience is, so that you can use the right language and the right examples. And then we've got an M as part of Amen, and this is your main job, your spokesperson's main job, which is messaging. Get that message across loud and clear, concise, strong, understandable, right at the start of your interview. And to support the message, you need the E, you need the example, the evidence. Preferably a human example, a strong case study, your own story, like we heard from Marcus, his own story. That will support your message and make people relate to it. And the N of Amen is the negative questioning, the negative tone that might come your way, just to watch out for. It might come from the journalist. Be careful that your spokesperson doesn't pick up on the negative in terms of language, in terms of tone of voice. So a really useful little matrix for you, Amen, that we teach on our courses here, just to help you make sure that you've prepared the best you can with your spokesperson to get that message and example across.
And we're also going to go and have a look at oh, look! As I've lost complete control of the slides, I'm going to hand over to the gallery. We're going to go and have a look at someone else, or a different way of looking at audience, aren't we? Have a look at some demographics and things like that, because it's a lot more than just who that one person is.
Yeah, there's demographics and there's psychographics, which is a fun new word that I recently learned. And this is a real way to drill in to who your audience is. So you could look at the audience in general, you could work out the age, the gender, what they do, how much they earn. That's the demographic profile. But also the psychographic, you can actually drill down to so you can visualize one person, so that you can channel this person when you're speaking to your TV or radio interviewer, and you can think, oh, this person, for example, loves crocheting while listening to podcasts in the evening, runs 5K every morning, enjoys traveling solo, all these other aspects of this person. And that can really help you understand a target listener or a target viewer. It's very niche, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And this is where I think, things like podcasting really come into their own. Because one of the things, for example, we know about podcasting is that the people that listen to podcasts tend to have more disposable income and are also more willing to spend that. So depending upon what your organisation is, whether it's a charity or a commercial organisation selling a product or a service, it's worth bearing things like that in mind and doing that research. But that psychographic profiling is something that journalists have done for years, and that every show that you listen to within a radio station, for example, or a TV station, every single show, and sometimes even segments of that show, will have been boiled down to that psychographic profile of, right, my target audience is Jenny, who is between 30 and 35 and drives this type of car and has a child and one dog, or doesn't have a child, and whatever it might be. It's really detailed. Journalists do that all the time, and obviously as comms professionals we should be doing that all the time for our audience, and also making sure we understand that demographic and psychographic profiling.
And ask the journalist, ask the media organisation, find out what the reach is, the listenership, who it is, what time of day the broadcast's going out. We'll tell you, hopefully, and then that'll help you with your profiling.
Another really good way of doing that, if you are struggling to get that information, is to actually talk to the advertising department, if there is such a thing for that broadcaster, because they're going to have a lot more stats on that, and we'll have a media pack that they can provide to you, which will really kind of boil down into that information. And obviously, the audiences are the same. I love this personas piece. Vic, tell us about King Charles and Ozzy Osbourne then.
Well, they're exactly the same, aren't they, in terms of demographic? Look, I mean, there's no difference between them there. They're both male, they're both born in the same year, raised in this country, both married twice, both wealthy and famous, and both live in a castle. So what's to choose between them?
Yeah, nothing. Nothing. Just to drive home that point about demographics and psychographics, I think that's really powerful. I think I might need to hand back over to the gallery for these slides again, but let me whiz through and see. We've got some key takeaways that we wanted to look at, but we also wanted to look at another video, didn't we, before we get to that?
Yeah, so this is a politician. Audio. Yes, this is some audio. This is a radio interview that you may have heard, or certainly heard about, with a politician you might recognise, who thought it was a good decision to do some local radio. Now, did this politician do her research, giving it away now, on her audience and on local issues that she would have been expected to know about because they are topical and relevant? Let's have a listen and see what you think.
I am of the view that we need to have local consent to proceed with projects like fracking. I also support that for housing. What I want is, and this is why we're setting up new investment zones across the country with local support to get the economy going, to get investment into our country. And the same is true for energy projects as well.
Let's talk about local consent right now. What does that look like? Scott Benton, the Conservative MP for Blackpool South, in a tweet says he believes that people in Blackpool South do not support fracking. This is the Tory MP for Fylde, Mark Menzies, in the House of Commons.
If the Prime Minister is to remain a woman of her word, a woman that we can believe in, which I believe she is, can the Secretary of State outline how that local consent will be given and demonstrated in my constituency of Fylde?
What does local consent look like, Prime Minister?
Well, the Energy Secretary will be laying out in more detail exactly what that looks like, but it does mean making sure there is local support for going ahead. And I can assure
it sounds like you don't know.
And I can assure Mark Menzies, well, there are various detailed issues to be worked through, but I can assure Mark Menzies that I will make sure there is local consent if we are to go ahead in any particular area with fracking.
But your local MPs don't want it, all Conservative. In the past, the County Council have said they didn't want it, yet your government overturned it. The science hasn't changed. Why can't you tell us this morning there won't be a return to fracking in Lancashire?
Well, I don't accept the premise of your question.
Why?
It's certainly the case at present, because what I've said is if there is local consent, we will go ahead. We need to explore where there is local consent and where there isn't.
So, what do we think of that? Bit of a car crash of an interview. I don't know, you might not know much about fracking. I'm no expert. I don't know about you, James. But Liz Truss, the Prime Minister, would have been expected to have done her preparation on local issues before appearing on local radio. And this wasn't the only local radio interview that went wrong for her, because she hadn't done the preparation and she'd made an assumption that it would be easy. And in fact, the power of local journalism is strong, because local journalists represent the local community and ask the questions on behalf of that particular audience, and that's where she got things wrong.
Yeah. Also, I think with local radio and regional TV, or for that matter, any kind of lower profile broadcast opportunities, that might be the only time he's ever going to get to talk to, Liz, and have that conversation. So he's going to really go for it.
Yeah, listen, it happened to me. I've interviewed a few prime ministers, former prime ministers, and yeah, I threw in an extra question on one occasion, and I've got to tell you, it didn't go down well. The prime minister answered the question. It was on foreign policy. He gave me the answer, but while I was asking that question and he was answering it, the comms person walloped me in the shoulder for being a naughty journalist. But yeah, it was my one opportunity. So of course I was going to throw in an extra question.
Yeah.
So yeah, maybe don't hit the journalist if they dare to ask that extra question.
Yeah, not a good look. Not a good look at all. Right, we do have some questions coming in, and there were some questions submitted in advance. We get to those in a moment. Again, you can go on to Menti, click in the bottom right. You can see that little chat thing and submit some questions there. I know we've seen those ones there though, guys, so thank you very much, and we'll answer those shortly. Let's have a look at key takeaways, and hopefully we can summarize and unpack some of the things that we've spoken about. So the importance of creating a strong message or call to action, that's just vital, isn't it, to be able to do that. And working with your comms team and the spokespeople, working with the spokespeople. And really, that is your chance as someone working in media or comms to be able to drive that message through your spokespeople. And sometimes that can be difficult, can't it? If you're working with particularly senior people who are very set in their ways, or they've got a very clear idea of what their message or call to action needs to be, you might need to rein them in and work with them on that. And that's really where building that relationship with the spokespeople comes in. Specific examples, Vic, you spoke loads about this, didn't you? About, preferably human examples, and, the importance of that. The AMEN acronym is really helpful for that perspective, and truth, as, with the H for human. Really important. Yeah, really important. Ensure both are deployed at the start of the interview. Yeah, front loading, get that message out there really, really quickly.
Yeah, come back to it at the end, but certainly get it in the first answer.
And that coming back to at the end, that works as well for print interviews, just to bear that in mind. If you're doing a telephone print interview and you've got your key message at the start, and then when a journalist will often say, is there anything else that you think I should know? And they will do that more likely in a print interview because they've got the time to be able to do that. But when that question comes, I think the key message that you need to get away, and try not to use key message, but the thing that I really want people to remember is this, and saying, having that opportunity to be able to say that again is really helpful. Relevance. Figuring out your audience, getting it right, figuring out the journalist audience. If you do radio days or you do broadcast days that are back to back, make sure you build in enough time in between to be able to refocus on the audience, because it will change from a national audience. It shouldn't be the same messaging. The way you deliver that messaging might need to be tweaked and adjusted. Make sure that you build in time in between those interview slots to be able to adapt accordingly. And also time to be able to provide feedback to spokespeople. We've seen some really, classic examples. For example, I remember the BlackBerry Crumble, we call it. I'll go and check out our blogs and have a look for BlackBerry Crumble. But when BlackBerry were launching their newest phone, and I can't remember the guy's name at the time, but he went out and he did a load of broadcast interviews back to back to back. And there clearly wasn't time in between to be able to, for the PR people to be able to go, hold on, that went wrong. Let's regroup and figure out how we do it right next time. Because he just made the same mistakes on, BBC Breakfast that he then went on to do on 5 Live, and then went on again, and he literally did a whole morning of the same mistakes, so yeah, not good. Practice out loud with your spokespeople, get them recording themselves on phones, get into an environment like this, do it with current working journalists, do it with someone outside of your organisation so that they can actually really test and prod on those messages and see. Often, Vic, you have people coming to us going, I've got this clearly defined message, I know what it is we're going to say, we're launching this campaign, and they come and do media training with you, and what happens?
They change their message.
They change their message. So, it's really important to be able to test that, and, don't feel that you need to go to media training with a completely defined message, because we can work with you to help hone that and adapt it. But yeah, that practice thing is really important. Quickly whiz through some of these. We've talked about truth, preparing for broadcast opportunities. We've looked at messaging and the AMEN acronym. Forming relationships with journalists. They're not scary. It's really important to work on those relationships, and for you to be able to have control as someone in comms and media of that relationship as well. So that means getting your spokespeople to tell you when they're having those conversations outside of your kind of group, because we know that happens. Location, think about the audio and the visuals. Think about the optics as well of that. If you're stood next to an exit sign and you're going to be asked a question about, isn't it time you resigned, maybe that's probably not the best place for you to be. So think about those optics, what it's actually going to look like. But also think about the positive optics that you can potentially put onto it. Those audio and those visual ideas. Can you, with radio, instead of doing an interview, if you're a charitable organisation working in environment, for example, instead of doing an interview in a dead sound booth with no sound, can we do that actually out in the field, literally in the field? Know what makes a good Zoom interview. Spoken a little bit about that, but lots more information on our website if you want to go and have a look at that, and some blogs that you can read about. And creating broadcast interviews, I'm just going to whiz through these super quick because I want to get to these questions, but these are all the things that you need to make sure that you've had in mind. Some of this we've spoken about at quite some depth. The be available one is also important. Right, I am opening up the questions here. We've got a couple of questions that have come in as we've been talking, Vic. How to prep spokespeople for live media interviews versus pre-recorded interviews. How do you do that differently, Vic?
I'd say you wouldn't do it differently.
Okay.
I'd say you prepare your people for any opportunity that they're going to take, and assure them if it's going to be live that will give them a platform and that they won't be edited. Mm-hmm. Assure them if it's going to be pre-recorded that they get their message and example into the first answer, which would be the same for live or pre-recorded.
Yeah. I think the only thing would be just about practice. And
out loud.
Practice out loud. Yeah, I'm with you. And if it is a pre-recorded or a live piece, figure out how it's going to be done. If it's on Zoom, let's practice on Zoom. If it's in a studio, let's practice in the studio. Yeah. If it's on radio and over the phone, let's do that. Or if it's an ISDN line, whatever it is, make it as realistic as possible. Yeah. That would be my recommendation there. Another question here we had was not really a question, but we find good regional press or broadcast is often picked up by national outlets. Yeah, completely.
That's because the regional press and broadcast journalists are doing the work. Yeah. And we just heard an example of it there. Somebody really knows their local issues. Yep. And then the national journalists find a good local story and think, oh, this works for a wider audience. Or maybe we can use this person to talk about something that it might apply, or it might just be interesting enough as a local example to appeal to a wider audience. So yeah, we do it all the time.
Yeah, and it works both ways as well. National stories can become regional stories, and it's important to have those different audiences, as we've already said, and be trying to capture those different things. We did have some questions that were submitted in advance, which we really appreciated. So we've got these coming up on the screen here, and we'll be able to see these. So Ken said, interested to know what Victoria thinks about how a person desiring to leverage broadcast media interviews should prepare when their agency or company or product they represent has recently suffered from a deservedly negative reputation and they want /need or are told to turn that around. So something's gone wrong,
You've had a crisis.
You've had a crisis.
How do you manage it?
How do you manage it? How do you rebuild that trust with your audience using the power of broadcast media?
Yeah. Well, it's great, Ken, that you would think about actually being proactive, because I think the worst thing to do is try and hide. It won't work. We will find you. So we do crisis comms training. We do a lot of it, and it helps people understand what to do if and when a crisis happens. A fire on site, a computer hack, something's gone wrong, and it's not one of those situations you can hope to win, but you can certainly use your tone, your prep, your knowledge, and an action plan to tell us what you plan to do about it. So lots of different things that you can do. But thank you, Ken, for saying that you would think about responding in the first case. That's great to hear.
Yeah, completely. And the other thing I think I would say there is, if you've got good relationships with the media and journalists before something goes wrong, that's going to put you in a much stronger position when something does go wrong, and also give you a much firmer platform for you to be able to then rebuild that trust afterwards. So I know it sounds kind of after the horse has bolted in that instance, it might be the case that, Ken's got a situation where something has gone wrong and maybe didn't initially have those great relationships with the broadcast media. But it's definitely a route that you need to be going down. There were a load more questions, and I'm so sorry that we've not been able to answer those. What we're going to do is we can we'll look at those questions, and maybe I will get Ads, who writes our blog at Media First, to provide some answers to those questions, and maybe Vic and I can help with that. But listen, it's been so good to have you all here. Thank you ever so much for joining us on this masterclass. Vic, thank you for joining us on the sofa again. You're getting quite comfortable in that spot, aren't you? And if you want to know more about the Media Team Academy, which is what this masterclass is kind of born out of, really, we do one of these each month. And it's always on a different topic, as you would expect. And we have different guests. Sometimes it's Vic, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's other people. Then get in touch with Media First, or pop a comment in the chat, or at the end of survey that you'll get a chance to do that. And let us know how we can help. But thank you ever so much for joining us today and being a part of this. And we hope to see you soon. Take care.
Bye-bye now.